right. Hello, everybody. I am joined once again by our wonderful CEO, Ben. My name is Ernest. I'm the CISO here at Datatel. And Ben, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ben Tiggelaar. I'm the CEO and owner of the company. And I like to typically represent the business owner or IT manager in these sorts of webinar setups. While Ernest, I view as the chief visionary from a technical perspective of our company. So we work in tandem, and we offer different perspectives and insights. And I think I always love our conversations.
Yeah, these are super fun to do. There's a lot of great stuff that comes out of them. Today we are focused on talking about zero trust. So Ben, as you're kind of coming into this IT stuff and from a business perspective, what have you heard about zero trust? What are some of the like from just a general marketing business sort of thing? What does zero trust mean to you?
So to me, zero trust means access denied immediately. You're assuming that there's a breach in your system. It's a framework and way of thinking about your IT infrastructure that ensures you're foundationally moving in the right direction to prevent against unauthorized breaches and loss of data.
Hmm. Yep, that's a great way to look at it. Zero trust is I want to be very clear about this. It's a marketing term, right? It's something that the marketing folks came up with to try and describe this new way of thinking about IT. But really, it's not a new way of thinking about IT security. For folks like myself that have been around this for such a long time, we know it as micro segmentation. So it's a concept of isolating things down to ensure that only the people who need to have access to something have access to it. Now, the tools that are utilized to accomplish that have come a long way over the years. Um, that's kind of where we get into traditional security versus the concept of zero trust. So traditional security was what we call the mass castle and moat approach. It's where you had your internal network and you put walls around it and you put a big firewall in front of it and you protected your network. And anything inside the network you trusted, and anything outside the network you didn't trust. Um, as those of us who've been around IT security for a long time have learned, usually the hard way, that approach has lots of weaknesses and issues, right? Anybody can walk in and plug into the data port in your conference room, and suddenly your network is breached. Anybody can walk in with a USB drive, and suddenly they've got access to all of your data across all of your servers and your network, and things can spread through a network with a vulnerability. That's the old castle and moat approach. It was very much we trust what's inside, we don't trust what's outside. Zero trust is shifting that concept over to we don't trust anything until we verify it. We don't trust the user, we don't trust the device, we don't trust the network. We assume that everything is breached from the very beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, from a castle and moat perspective, where I guess why it seems like to me, at least from what I understand about the market, that most companies and even most IT service providers still operate under a traditional security model rather than a zero trust. What is driving that?
It's the way things have been done, and it's easy, right? It's easy to look at a building and say, oh, the building has walls and the building has doors, and if I want to secure the building, then I'm going to go around and make sure that all the windows are closed and locked and make sure that all the doors are closed and locked, right? That's an analog to our day-to-day lives. If we want to make sure our car is locked before we leave it in a parking spot, we make sure the windows are rolled up and the doors are locked. Your car is secured. That's the way that things operate on a regular basis. But even in our daily lives, that's starting to shift, right? We're getting to the point where my van, for example, I've got the key here for my van. I can set one of the keys for my van to have a different set of rules, to have a limiter so it can't go over a certain speed. It requires that seat belts be, you know, plugged in before it can go into drive. Like I can set those sorts of things in my van now for, say, a youngster who's just learning to drive. That's more the concept of zero trust, where you're identifying the person who's walking into the vehicle or the space and only allowing them specific access, versus the old traditional model, which was just if you roll the windows up and locked the doors. It's really easy to deploy that model, right? It's been around for ages. The old castle and moat model has just been there forever, and it's really easy versus the new zero trust methodology of, do you even know where all of your data is?
It reminds me of a conversation I had with a client before. They said, "Hey, we're protected. We have a firewall." Right?
Right.
So like how do you like that's the traditional approach, right? Like the physical based approach rather the zero trust model is more cloud driven at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, zero trust doesn't have to be cloud. It's a lot easier to deploy if you're utilizing cloud. A lot easier. But it's just a way of thinking. It's a way of understanding where is my data, who needs access to what data, and then defining the rules and technology to ensure that only the people who are properly verified with multi-factor authentication have access to that specific data that they need. It's a lot more detail oriented, right? It's a lot more nitpicky. Are the individual office doors closed? Are all of the drawers in my cabinets locked, right? It's going through and making sure that you've got a safe inside of your house that you're also locking, and only certain people have access to that safe with that sensitive data. It's a very different way of thinking that requires a lot more intent in how you're deploying security versus the old traditional models, which really was just a checkbox. Do I have a firewall? Yes.
Makes sense. I get it.
Yeah. One of the other really big things to talk about when we talk about firewalls is that when firewalls were a big deal and when they were very important to IT security, internet traffic was not secured. Internet traffic was plain text. There was not a lot of encryption going on. Your bank websites were encrypted, and that was about it. Everything else was plain text going back and forth across the internet. These days, that whole paradigm has shifted. So your traditional firewall that was before able to see what websites you were visiting, was able to watch your DNS requests, was able to provide all this proper filtering, it's blind now because all of the traffic passing through it, or 99.8% of that traffic, is encrypted. So it's invisible unless you go through the whole process of deploying certificates. And there's a whole big manual process to actually make firewalls function properly in today's IT environment. And that's something that a zero trust model with the right technology can very rapidly overcome that problem. Benefits of zero trust. First one's enhanced data protection. We already talked about that, making sure you've got the granular controls in place. Improved threat detection, and then reducing your attack surface. So you're taking what used to be, oh, I run a scan on my network and I can see every device on my network, to I can only see the 2 or 3 things I need to interact with on a daily basis. Your improved threat detection is because you're now monitoring, you're tracking, you're logging every request that comes through your systems, right? It's no longer a, hey, you've walked into the house, go make yourself at home type of setup. You're actively tracking who is where and what they're doing within your network.
So by this logic, I mean, one of the things that I've heard is, hey, my company's never been breached yet, right? But the way that you're describing this is that if you implement a zero trust architecture, you're actually going to track and identify more breaches than before, right? Like all else
We
equal.
have caught a bunch of insider threats across our client environment. So fully managed clients, one of the things that we're doing is we're watching for large number of files that get downloaded all of a sudden. If somebody's pulling a bunch of files off of, say, SharePoint into their local device, we need to figure out why. Why are they doing that? What kind of files are they pulling down, right? There's insider threats that are just as, if not more important than the outside threats that you're facing. So a breach isn't just a matter of, oh, an attacker got in and ransomwared all of my data. An attack these days can come as simply as, oh, we fired an HR person, or we're about to, and they're going to be stealing and taking along all of this competitive data that's going to damage my business. IT security is covering the entire organization, not just from the bad guys, but from also the people that you think you can trust internally. And again, I'm not saying that people are bad. There are really good people who work for you that can make mistakes. Maybe they don't realize that, oh, I'm going to put all these files onto a thumb drive so that I can take them home and work on them. But then their home computer's breached, right? There's a breach then that you don't understand is happening. So a lot of it, some of it just comes down to user education, but you can't educate them if you're not aware of the exceptions and the risks that are occurring.
100%. And the reduced attack surface. I mean, you did a good job of describing like why it's threat as an overall rather than just breach, right? Because threats can come from any space, right? Or but in terms of an attack surface, how does zero trust actually reduce that?
Zero trust is identifying the user and giving them access to the resources they need to do their job, nothing else. So, as an example, me on the security side of things, I don't need access to the accounting information. So I don't have access to the accounting information. Like it's my computer can't reach those files. It can't reach that data because my user permission and who I am as my role doesn't require access to those things. But your role does. And so by reducing the attack surface, we're limiting who can access what. If a threat gets onto my machine, it can't interfere with the accounting data. It just can't. It doesn't even have access to it, even if I am intentionally trying to reach something or unintentionally have something on my computer that's trying to grab data.
Got it. So by the nature of it, it's reducing the ultimate severity and impact of any potential breach that does happen,
Yep. So
basically.
imagine you walk into a high rise and they've got a system in their elevators where you have to have a badge to access certain floors. Same concept here. We're identifying that the user specifically has the badge to access the floor that has the data that they need access to.
Got it.
Zero trust is also becoming a major part of compliance and legal requirements. They've always had things in there about minimizing access to data, access control, and verifying, logging, those sorts of things. Especially when you're talking about HIPAA and NIST, they've always had these in place. Now they're starting to write into their specifically zero trust. From the federal government side, they've put out and said, hey, everybody in the federal government must have, all of the different agencies must have zero trust implemented. So this is becoming something where it's no longer oh, that's a shiny thing, but it's a real practical, how do we do this now? Because it is a part of our IT infrastructure. And especially as we're getting further and further down the line, insurance companies are going to start requiring this as well. So it is not something to stick your head in the sand and ignore. It is a really important part of what is happening now and will be the future of IT security.
Obviously, with regulated industries being the first adopters, right? Because of regulatory concerns and reasons, is my guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Now this is where we get to the cloud discussion, and we start talking about land zero trust in addition to how all of this applies to your local area network as well. So SASE, service access, a secure access service edge. SASE is a way of thinking about it as an always-on VPN connection. It's a solution that makes sure that your computer is connected to corporate resources regardless of where it is. It's really nothing new, and it still utilizes a lot of the old technology. It just automates it so that when your computer comes online, it's properly connected. The SASE solutions also look at your computer and ensure that it has the right compliance, that it's got the EDR on it, that it's got all your other security layers implemented, MFA, it's in the right physical boundaries that it should be in, et cetera. So SASE is a way of delivering a lot of these zero trust concepts from a cloud perspective while also providing the connectivity, which we'll dive into in a practical sense here in a moment. Land zero trust is the concept of taking those firewall rules and applying them to your local network. So my computer can't see the computer sitting on the desk next to me because there's no reason for those two computers to communicate with each other.
So SASE is the way of delivering. Land zero trust is the rules of the game.
Yeah, it's a method of connecting everything regardless of location. It takes your local network out of the picture. That's what SASE does. It allows you to connect all of your resources regardless of where you're physically located. We're talking about the castle and moat. It removes the castle from the picture.
Got it.
So we're going to dive a bit more into our actual platform because discussing these things is great, but practical implementation and how we actually do it is really, really important. And to me, I'm a big proponent of let's teach how to actually make it work and show what we're doing in a practical sense. So we're going to take a look at some network stuff here. This is within one of our clients' unified network environments. And the first thing I want to touch on is VLANs, or virtual local area networks. What a VLAN is it's taking your physical network that you have all of your devices plugged into, and it's segmenting it. We talked about micro segmentation, making sure that things can't talk to each other unless they need to. That's exactly what we're doing here. And so we create a series of these VLANs across our clients' networks, internal, guest, staff, voice. So we segment. We don't allow physical phones like your IP phones to exist on the same network that your computers exist on. There's risk there because the phones we can't install an agent on, we can't put EDR on, we can't secure an IP phone the way that we do a computer, a laptop, or a desktop. And so making sure that that traffic is maintained separately, so when one of those phones gets breached, it can't be used to internally, access the rest of your network. Printers. Printers are another big one. Printers have little microcomputers running on them. And the firmware and software on those things is not updated very often at all. It is full of vulnerabilities and holes. Surveillance systems. There was not too long ago, someone whose NVR, network video recorder, their surveillance system got breached, and the attackers went into it and they turned on IPv6 and started routing all of the local traffic to that network video recorder. They were capturing all of the traffic that was happening on the local network and sending it outside of the network. They were stealing information through the video system, and nobody could figure out what was happening because it didn't show up on any EDR scans. It didn't show up on any network scans. It didn't show up on the firewall. Nobody could figure out how this data was getting out of the network. And it was, again, because of the network video recorders. Those things are little computers running around. We've got a ton of IoT, little devices that are stuck everywhere that are connected to the internet these days. So those are also really important. And then physical security. So it's segmenting your network up from an architectural perspective, your physical network, assuming that your physical network is breached or is going to be breached, is a really core part of Zero Trust, ensuring that you're segmenting those devices properly.
And a typical network would look completely flat, right? Like there's no segmentation. Like that's what we mean. That's what they mean when they say it's a flat network, you're exposed. When you walk in the door, you can see everything. This does a really good job of outlining like, wow, okay, you really are segmenting by the different functions that maybe you don't always have complete control over. Like you said, printers. Like we know there's lots of vulnerabilities in those.
Yeah, I mean, this particular network, before we got started, before we walked in the door, was a flat network. They had just one giant VLAN that everything was attached to. And that's all of your guest devices. So every cell phone walking in the door, all of your printers, all of your phones, all of their control devices that were managing their plant, all on the same device, all on the same network with, Wi-Fi password that was known by everybody that also happened to be the domain admin password. Very poor security. But it was easy. It was fast and it was easy, right? It didn't cause a lot of issues because it was easy. Anybody just had the password to do whatever they needed to do with it. And that's really where Zero Trust and properly locking down an IT environment requires somebody with expertise. You need to understand what's possible and what should be done in order to direct things and guide them down the path they need to go.
Love this.
So the next thing we'll look at is our internal. So our SGN agent allows us to deploy a little software agent that has a whole bunch of features and functionality packed into it, things we've already talked about. So it has SASE baked into it. It's got a SIEM baked into it. It's got your EDR. All of this stuff exists within this one little agent, and it works beautifully alongside. It has an amazing endpoint security platform already built into it. It also ties in with Windows Defender. So we've got multiple layers of defense on every endpoint. But we're talking specifically today about Zero Trust. And when we talk about Zero Trust, we have to look at how are the rules implemented? How do you implement allowing specific people access to specific things while not making it a giant overhead burden? And you can tell just by our firewall rules here, we don't have a ton. There's 11 rules here across for us internally here at Datatel. There's 11 rules. It's not that complicated. We have some users with their own devices that we allow access to our remote desktop connection server, and they can get to that server, and then we block them from everything else. And this is done through a device group. So those devices are added to a group. That group has rules applied to it. We've got our own internal devices that we allow to talk to that server. And then we allow the servers to talk to each other, right? Because they need to be able to coordinate those remote desktop connections. We've got some Screen Connect and some backup stuff in here. This rule is really interesting because it restricts this. The restrictions here are based on Microsoft 365 user groups. So if you are a part of our server and network engineering team, then you have access to the Veeam console, or if you're a part of our SOC team like myself. But if you're not a part of these two teams, you can't get to that console. You can't even see it.
Oh, awesome. So this is where the integration within the Microsoft, Microsoft Intune and Microsoft Groups comes into play.
Exactly, because we're able to identify either specific people or groups of people and restrict their access to just the things that they need access to. If I pull up here, for example, Advanced IP Scanner, these are the devices internally on our networks that I can see. And there's 3 servers, and the rules for those servers are all over here within what we're doing without diving into too many details. But those are the 3 servers I have access to. This is my computer and this is the router. That's it. So if something gets on my computer, the only thing that it could potentially do is reach out to the web services on these 3 servers, because we're even limiting down to the specific port. It can't even talk to the server on an authenticated basis. It can't use my username and password to gain access to it because we're limiting to just the web consoles and the web ports on those servers, just exactly what we need access to and nothing else. That's a practical implementation of Zero Trust. Where does your data live? What machines and servers and services do they need access to? And then which users need access to those points? So that's it. That's what I've got on the Zero Trust side of things and how we have implemented it here at Datatel, and the practical implementation of how to make that work in every organization out there. I mean, this is something we've done on small, tiny organizations of 1 or 2 users up to many thousands of users. It scales incredibly well.
So where do you even start with Zero Trust? If you're an IT manager, a CIO, you've got a flat network, like where do you even begin? Like what's the most important first step out of 10 in your mind?
That's a fantastic question. It aligns perfectly with one of our attendees here who has asked, can Zero Trust be implemented in phases, or does it require a full-scale rollout? And the answer to that is it requires a full-scale planning, but it can absolutely be implemented in phases. So the very first step of implementing Zero Trust is understanding where is your data. The second step is who are your user groups. You have to identify how you're going to break up the users into who needs access to that data. You need to identify where that data is located. Once you have those 2 things identified, then it's a question of, do I have data that's intermingled, right? Do I have operational data that's on an accounting share? How do I split those things up? How do we work with the users and with the internal organization to reorganize and restructure things in a way that makes logical sense? Once you've got those original steps done and that planning done, the technical implementation is fast, simple, and easy with today's tools and technology. It's a matter of building out those rules, as you saw within our own systems, building out those rules and hitting go.
Why, I guess, why don't more MSPs utilize this sort of approach? Is it really just legacy, or do they think they're doing the right thing?
Oh, that's a hard question because no
Be
MSP is
honest.
going to be trying to be, um, they're not trying to get their client networks breached. Most MSPs struggle with zero trust because they don't value, how do I put this? Most MSPs struggle with it because they're stretched so thin already. They don't value their services enough to charge properly for them, which doesn't give them the room and margin to be able to invest in understanding the technology and where it's headed. They're just trying to keep up with today. There's so much going on and so many issues rolling in the door, and they're being so reactive in the way that they operate that they don't have the time, brain space, or the people or the finances to push forward and understand what this new paradigm shift is and how they can deploy it, which is a real weird catch-22 to be in, because what we have found is that by implementing zero trust and by implementing these boundaries across our client environments, they become quieter, which gives us the ability to have, right? So
Well,
it's this
it is
whole weird
interesting
catch
because
22 setup.
yeah, because I mean, you just described what basically most mid-sized clients that we work with, like that's what we hear from them is like they're worried about moving to a zero trust or SASE environment because of uh, lack of knowledge, right? Lack of ability to implement, and then uncertainty around how that actually comes to fruition. It seems like more work at front, but then at the tail end, you have more freedom and flexibility in time, right? So yeah,
Right.
it's a slight investment, and I can see the challenge. Is budget sometimes a problem here? Like, is it more expensive to implement? I mean, you said it costs more generally, right? Because there's more going on here. Like, what's driving that?
But does it? Does it cost more? What it costs is the time and effort up front to understand your environment and to get things where you've got the proper users and you've got the proper data segmented correctly. That's a huge investment of time, effort, and energy that has an impact on the business while you're moving those files and structures and data around to get them where you can segment them properly. That investment is real. The actual investment of the zero trust technology itself is incredibly affordable. There's big vendors out there, right? You go after the big boys, you're going to have a big price tag. There's plenty of options out there, especially with the platform that we have that makes it incredibly affordable for everybody. Again, we've got this deployed for 2 user companies up to thousands of users. So, one of the questions that we've got here is what's the ROI on investing in the zero trust model and how do you justify the cost?
Mm.
It comes down to what's the cost of a breach. Right. If you don't implement, what's the cost of not implementing zero trust? It's kind of like what's the cost of not putting a fire suppression system in your building? Right. You got a bunch of heavy machinery and equipment running around. If those things catch on fire, what is the cost of not being able to produce your goods? What is the cost of having to replace all of that machinery? What is the cost of paying your employees who can't do any work? What's the cost of having a breach? Your data is exactly the same. Today, IT and technology is no different than the physical machinery used to produce goods. The two are intertwined in such an intense way that the impact of one impacts the other. So the return on investment of a zero trust model, and it does feel like insurance, right? It feels like you're paying for something that might not happen. But the reality is it's going to happen. Breaches are going to happen regardless of whether you want to deny it or not. You are going to get breached. Just take a look at our large financial organizations, right? We look at who's been breached recently. Our credit scores are out there everywhere. All of our credit data is out there now because of a lack of internal security. It is AI versus AI, and the red team, the folks who are fighting the attackers, have the advantage. They have unlimited time, they have almost unlimited resources, and they have zero morals. Whereas those of us on the blue team who are defending against all of this, we've got to make sure that people are functional and usable. And, we can't just delete the user because that solves our problem. Um, so a breach will occur with every organization. It's a question of when, not if.
That's an interesting philosophical point here that I think even people within the IT industry think, or even clients, right? They think I want to prevent and avoid breaches 100%, right? And that just isn't it's just it's a fallacy, right? It's just not true. Sure, are there people who haven't been breached the last 2 years? Yes, but how do you know, right? They're
But
not even
have they?
documenting. Yeah, that's the point, right? Like they're
There's
not
no tracking.
there's no tracking. So what do you know exists? So that's where the challenge of like the IT professional comes into this is like, how do you, how do you show value? How do you even, you're an IT director and you're trying to convince your CEO or the board how this is important to start down this zero trust path. Like,
Mhm.
how do you see executive buy-in as part of that that path? Like, how do we do that?
Well, 5 years ago, I would have said we just have to roll it in with what we're doing. But today we have a lot of tools and levers in front of us. We've got insurance providers that are demanding this. We've got, compliance frameworks that are requiring this. We've got the federal government requiring this within their own infrastructures. The pressure here is real and it applies. The other thing that's really changed over the last several years is that the government's holding individuals accountable. They're holding the C-suite accountable. When there's a breach, it's no longer just, oh, you had a breach and here's a little slap on the wrist of a few $100,000 fine. They're now saying, all right, you as the CTO, as the COO, as the CEO, were given the opportunity to prevent this breach by putting the right tools and methodologies in place. You chose not to. So now you as an individual are sanctioned. Any company you go to, you have to provide us with all of these reports. You have to tell us all of this stuff that's going on. We're holding you personally accountable. So finding those stories and bringing them up to your C-levels is what's going to really have the biggest impact on, oh, it's not just the business, it's not just saving cost. Myself, my personal ability to do my job and who I am is on the line as well.
Another tangential question is one of the main concerns about, I guess, talk to me about VPNs and how this interacts with Zero Trust. I know a lot of users and a lot of companies have a lot of pain related to VPN. Do you still use VPNs within a Zero Trust network architecture, or like how do those interact and what does that look like?
Yeah, and even our own platform, even the Datatel SGN operates off of VPN technology, the underlying technology that makes SASE, as again, marketing term, that makes SASE work is VPN. It's a VPN connection that comes on, connects itself, right? It's the same connectivity technology that's been around for a very, very long time. The hard part with a traditional VPN client is that the user has to open it. They have to authenticate against it. They've got to put in their multi-factor authentication against it. It's not simple. And so for them, there's a 5 to 10 minute loss every time that they want to start their day to get access to corporate resources. And from an IT security standpoint, those users don't have to go through those 5 or 10 minutes. If they don't connect their VPN, you can't monitor their endpoint. All of a sudden, whatever internet stuff they're doing, whatever's on their local home network or coffee network or wherever they happen to be, that device is open to everything that's on that network, right? Even though you can put on Windows firewall, but there's vulnerabilities. There's ways into things that there's ways to intercept data that a traditional VPN client can't protect against when it's turned off. And then you've got the whole speed issue, because if you have a VPN client, it's connected to your physical location, limited by your physical internet, and you're dealing with what's called a hairpin turn, where you've got the person who requests the information, it comes to your local network, it then goes back out that same firewall to your internet, and then the response has to come back. So you're doubling the traffic over your local internet at your physical location, which causes delays. It causes risks. The further away the user is, right, the slower their access to things is going to be. SASE solves all of those issues. It takes the same underlying technology, automatically connects them to the closest point of access, and then runs over a private fiber backbone to get to your network. So your data is always accessible at the highest possible speed, and their internet traffic is running at high speeds. One of the super unique things that we have nobody else does, is that our systems can operate at gigabit speeds. So our VPN connections, our SASE tunnels operate at gigabit speeds. We can utilize the full bandwidth that a user may have accessible to them. You're no longer limited to 100 megabit or 10 megabit, whatever connectivity that your firewall limits your traditional VPN access to.
I've got a couple of there's a couple of questions in the chat. I'll read one. If anyone has any other questions, let us know. We'll be wrapping up here in a couple of minutes. But the question here is, how do the different security processes actually handle breaches, or is this primarily about containment? Basically, like what happens if and when there is a breach? How does Zero Trust, what is the impact of that breach and what does it look like? Like, how does
So
it
there's
actually respond? That's outside of Zero Trust, right? But
well, there's multiple ways to look at that. So if you just implement zero trust, nothing else, just the zero trust methodology, you're limiting access. So once a threat actor is in the environment and a breach has occurred, they can only get to the things that that user has access to, right? So that's contained. You're definitely handling zero trust is about that containment aspect of limiting what people can do. And if you've implemented it properly, then those resources they won't even be able to access because, for example, within our own systems and our own setup, even if you were to breach one of our Microsoft 365 accounts, you can't get to any of our internal systems because they're also locked behind our SASE solution, right? Our documentation system, it's not available on the internet. You can't get to it over the internet. You can't get to our client communication and connections software and systems because, again, they're not accessible over the standard internet. You have to be inside of our SASE solution in order to do that, which means you have to have that SGN agent installed on the computer. So even if you steal our credentials, our zero trust methodology is limiting access to resources because you still have to have a physical machine in order to move forward with anything.
I think
Now, you want to
I
talk
think
about
yeah,
response.
response.
Response
Yep.
comes down to SIEM and it comes down to logging and how well you're monitoring that logging. So we've got a very large client who is using a traditional EDR vendor. And when some notification comes in, they don't have somebody sitting at a desk 24/7. So these notifications come in, hey, this thing was found or this vulnerability exists or whatever. They don't action on it until the next business day. So because they don't have response, they're not there, they're not watching it all of the time. And that's one of the other super unique things about our platform. Um, and that's one of the other questions that we have here is what makes Datatel's SGN platform different from other zero trust solutions. It's that we build in the whole spectrum. We build in zero trust. We build in the SASE for connectivity. We build in the SIEM for logging everything. We build in the SOC for reacting and response. When it comes down to a breach, it really comes down to time. They're going from initial access to exfiltration of data in less than 18 minutes. Less than 18 minutes from the time they gain access to something to the time they have all of your data. It's mind-blowing. So response and having rapid response or having automated response in place is super, super, super important in order to block the breaches as they occur. It's no longer a matter of preventing them because they're going to happen. Once they do happen, how rapidly are you able to respond to it, react to it, and lock it down?
Yeah, they're all connected, right? So then this allows you to ultimately segmentation, limiting impact should and when a breach occur, right? So it's reducing the severity of any impact is the big benefit to this. And then when that happens, what are you doing, right? Then you have your response, right? Based off the data
Yep.
that you're collecting. So, okay,
Yep.
makes complete sense. Looks like I don't see any other questions. So at this
I don't
point, I
either.
think we can probably wrap up. But learned a ton about zero trust. Anything else you want to leave? Parting words, Ernest? Something you wish that people should know about zero trust? That maybe it is just a marketing term, but it feels pretty important to me.
Start down the path of it, right? Start down, don't don't get caught up with complacency. That's my biggest message to everyone out there. Don't get caught up with complacency. You're going to get run over if you just stand in the road and wait for stuff to happen around you. This is happening. This is going to happen. And just like AI, this is going to start making a major impact within environments. So get prepared now. That's really the message that I have.
Great. Thanks for your time, Ernest. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.